Next level. Next level.
For anyone who just got here, if you guys haven't seen this, be careful. If your hot air station is heating up, and I'm assuming there's no airflow, and this starts happening, yeah, probably want to unplug that sucker or turn it off as soon as possible. This is a viewer submitted picture, and that's the way that I understand it. Is something got disconnected here, and this thing just kept getting hot, but no air blowing through there to cool it down, and you can see the metal is melting, just about to liquefy probably before the thing got turned off. What's going on, everyone? It's Mike. Welcome to everyone who's already in the chat. Good to see you guys here. Real World Review, Greg M, Johnny, Chang, and Harvey. Today we have all sorts of interesting tech stuff to talk about, but we keep this kind of a loosely open forum. So if you've got some questions or comments you want to input, let's talk about them. There's all sorts of stuff going on in tech all the time. It's very difficult to narrow this down to 6, and then we try to squeeze them into an hour. So I talk really fast. You can always play this back slower if you need to, or faster if it seems like it's droning on and on. Today, I'm happy to say that California's net neutrality bill is one step closer to being passed. It got past a committee that it needed to go before, and it will almost definitely go for a vote before the state assembly next week, which will, I think, just kind of be something to show the rest of the country what's going on, you know, for the states that haven't already started their own legislation to bring back net neutrality, and hopefully send a message to big ISPs to let them know that, yeah, keep pumping that lobbying money in and keep trying. But eventually, you know, I think the will of the people hopefully will overcome the interests of big corporations. Verizon, coincidentally, allegedly throttled data during the Northern California wildlife crisis. If that is what it sounds like it is, this is bad. I mean, it looks bad, especially now. Xiaomi's hacker-friendly Pocophone F1, which we probably won't see here in the US, but still, I think, worth discussing. Grab-and-run suspects tackled by Apple customers. Customers, not Apple Store employees, by Apple customers. That's some brand loyalty right there. Android phones sending data to Google more often than iOS devices, even when they are idle and not doing anything. So if you ever had that sneaking suspicion that Google, Apple, or anyone else was kind of keeping track of your every move, well, you're not crazy after all. And is your target a DNA, is your DNA a target for hackers? Okay, I don't normally use what I call extremist news sources, and that would be mainly Fox News and CNN. This one did come from Fox, but I think it's worth looking into at least, you know, for discussion purposes. All right, let's talk some tech. What's going on, everyone? Verizon are changing their motto to always be cool. Yeah, they're going to have to. Yeah, it does look like a lava lamp, right? Expensive space heater. You know, I just realized that when I do this live stream, I've been extracting the audio and using it for a podcast. And a lot of times I glance over and read the comments that you guys post, and I wonder if people who are listening to the podcast are going, why is he saying that? Like, it doesn't make any sense, and out of context, it could probably sound, you know, a little off color. So hopefully, I think I'm just going to keep archiving these so I can go back and say, here's what was actually going on. In any case, let's jump right into this because we got so much to talk about today, and really a relatively short period of time to talk about it. At the top, that's not even what I wanted to have on the screen. There we go. So at the top of the list here, we have a committee in California that passes a bill. It's going to go to the assembly for a possible vote next week. I don't know why they say possible vote. That concerns me a little bit. But what we're talking about here is SB 822. And this is an article from Ars Technica, I think is the correct way to pronounce it. A California state net neutrality bill described as the strongest in the country was approved by a key legislative committee yesterday and is close to final passage. You have all been hearing me talk about this for the last year at least, because this is something I believe is important to all of us, no matter what you're doing. Just by virtue of the fact that you're watching YouTube right now, this is going to affect you. Long story short, they put this to a vote in front of a committee that is called the Assembly's Communications and Conveyance Committee in California, and all 9 of the 9-3 yes votes came from Democrats, while the 3 no votes were made by Republicans. And I don't understand this. No matter what you may consider yourself, you know, no matter who you voted for, none of that should really matter when it comes down to freedom of communication. I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican or independent or anything else or part of the Green Party. If you don't care about being able to protect freedom of speech, and if you don't care about keeping big companies in check so that they can't monopolize businesses and extract the maximum amount of money from people who have no other alternative but them, then I don't understand where you're coming from. So I think it's very odd that, at least in this situation, that, you know, everyone, including all of the Republicans, were not on board with this. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I don't know what that's about. But in any case, if you're interested, SB 22 will most likely, and as far as I know, go for a vote next week. It's already passed the Senate back in May, so we're part of the ways there. And what happened was it was moving forward, and then this gentleman, Miguel Santiago, who is a Democrat from the Los Angeles area, and if you are in Los Angeles, I would encourage you to consider this next time he comes up for election. He basically watered this thing down so that most of the protections that we wanted from net neutrality would not be there anymore, and that's why they decided not to go forward with this. But Mr. Weiner, Scott Weiner, I believe it is, has been a proponent of this bill and has negotiated with him, and the same committee that approved it yesterday, who had gutted the bill in June after pressure from AT&T and cable lobbyists. Big surprise. We know how this process works. If you have the money to do it and you're big enough, you can basically take over the country, and this is what is should be of concern to everyone who believes in freedom. In yesterday's committee vote, the bill was approved with all key protections intact, Weiner's announcement said. So it looks like this thing is going to go forward. Hopefully it will pass the assembly. I'm sure that it's going to be an uphill battle all the way. But if nothing else, it's an indication of what people believe in, given it's an election year. So obviously that makes a difference. This is when we see people come out and advocate for the population, or for the citizens, for the people who reside in the state or the district that they govern. Obviously, they're going to come out and say, yeah, we want to do the right thing for the citizens. And there was one comment down here that I thought was interesting. A governmental organization doing the right thing seems such an oddity in this day and age. And that's sad that we would even say that or see that comment. But when you think about it, there is a bit of that going on. It's a sad state of affairs when a government body intercedes to stop corporations from blatantly fleecing its customer base. I believe you meant to say as praiseworthy news. And that really is sad that, yes, this is a big deal. We're so happy that we might actually get back what we've taken for granted for a long time. We really shouldn't have to celebrate that. This should be expected. But again, if you follow the money trail, you get an indication of how and why these kind of things happen. So certainly hope that this will go through. And when it does, even though it won't change the way that big cable companies have to operate throughout the U.S., what it will do is force them to comply with state laws, which will make it very difficult for them to operate one way in our state and a different way somewhere else. So hopefully this will all kind of spread across the country, and everyone will come up with their own net neutrality bills until either the federal government or the big ISPs just give in and say, okay, let's do what the people want and keep things fair and accessible, and not try to just extort extra money for profit by saying, oh, if you want to watch this, now you get to pay more. Or if you don't like our news, you have to pay extra to hear someone else's version of the same story or a different story. It's craziness. Hey, Carl, how's it going? Caught in a time vortex, not a problem. That happens to me quite often. I almost ended up being late today. Our DNA will be the target to hacking once the human genome and uniqueness becomes subject of patents. Interesting for constituents. Yeah, and we're going to talk about that also. Like I said, all kinds of crazy stuff going on this week. So coincidentally, as we're trying to move this bill through Congress in California, if you guys aren't already aware, there's some big fires going on in Northern California. Many people have lost their lives. Many people have been injured. Homes have been destroyed. And if you live anywhere in that area, all the way up into eastern Oregon now, there's just smoke everywhere. It's crazy. It's a health hazard. They're saying that right now in that particular location, eastern Oregon, the air quality is worse than Beijing, which should give you an idea of how bad things are. In fact, if we see Nate here, I was going to ask him if the smoke hasn't got over to where he has. I imagine it probably has, because he's kind of just east of Oregon in the northern part of Idaho. Hey, what's up, Joshua Fitzpatrick? Good to see you. So let's go over here to the Verizon thingy that I was looking at. So California wildfires, Verizon throttled data during crisis. I'm going to say allegedly. However, this is BBC News, which is, it has been, who came to this conclusion, I'm not sure. But to my knowledge, BBC News is one of the most reliable news sources that there are. You don't see a bunch of crazy clickbait, fake news and stuff coming from here. And someone actually said that they were either #1 or #2 in the world for reliability when it comes to news and truthfulness. A U.S. mobile network has admitted it should not have slowed California's firefighters' data speeds as they tackled what has become the largest blaze in the state's modern history. The company throttled an emergency vehicle's data rate to about 0.5% of its normal level. So why would this happen? I mean, obviously this makes Verizon look very bad. Verizon said a mistake has been made. Yeah, I think so. And down here, the incident was revealed in court papers filed as part of several states' efforts to reverse a repeal of the U.S.'s net neutrality rule. Sorry, can't talk again today. So, like I said, coincidentally, as we're trying to get net neutrality back, this happens, which really is good, a good argument against repeal of net neutrality. It just happens that this occurred right around this time that everything was going on. And of course, it leaves a lot of questions here as to, why that would happen. And I want to talk about a little bit about cellular priority here in a second. But first, Fire Chief Anthony Bowden said that the vehicle affected was normally used as a mobile command and control unit at major emergencies. And in doing so, let's see, they had to use this stuff obviously to track, organize, and prioritize routing of resources from around the state and country to the sites where they are most needed. Doing so, he added, involved the use of up to 10 gigabytes of data per day. Now, that is a lot of data, obviously, especially on a mobile network, but we're talking about emergency services who pay their bills like anyone else. It's not like Verizon is doing this as a public service where they go, hey, everybody gets free phones because there's a fire going on. These government organizations are still in a contract. They still have an agreement where they pay the carrier for their usage. They pay for their equipment. There's all sorts of stuff here. It's like a normal business operation. And, the difference being that when we're talking about emergency services, those are the last people that we want to lose their connection, their data capability. When it comes to communication, we want them to be prioritized to the top, I would think, right? He wrote that the vehicle's downloads had been capped at 0.2 megabits per second. I don't know if you've ever tried to operate at that speed, but it is literally worse than a dial-up connection. I've had my data throttled because I ran out of my regular 4G LTE, and I can understand if they slowed it down to like 3G speeds or maybe even 2G speeds. But when you're talking about 0.2 megabits per second, that is at a snail's pace, meaning the article goes on to say it has no meaningful functionality. Like, you can't do anything at 0.2 megabits per second. I know, you should try this. It's ridiculous. Like, you're not going to do you're not even going to read your emails. It's insane. At the time, news reports were warning that 4,500 buildings were at risk from the Northern California wildfire and that 7 firefighters had been injured trying to subdue it. Remove any data throttling effective immediately, added the department's IT officer in a follow-up message. However, again, this is according to an article, okay? So I'm going to say allegedly. However, rather than doing so, Verizon allegedly continued to negotiate a switch to a more expensive contract. So apparently, in the middle of this crisis that's going on where people's homes and the forest and everything around them is burning up, the fire department says, we need more data, and Verizon says, you need a new contract and a new plan, and we need to figure out what plan to get you on, instead of saying, you know what, let's make an exception here, or let's just go ahead and bill you afterwards. Let's open the cap, let's extend it, let's do something else. No, we need you to get into a new contract. Wow. In light of our experience, County Fire believes it is likely that Verizon will continue to use the exigent nature of public safety emergencies and catastrophic events to coerce public agencies into higher cost plans, ultimately paying significantly more for mission-critical service, even if that means risking harm to public safety during negotiations, he said. However, Verizon disputes this claim, and they should, regardless, I would imagine. But, bottom line, what are they going to do about this in the future? Way back in the day, when we would set up cell phones, and this is back during the analog days, okay? So I'm talking about way, way, way back. When we would set up cell phone service for law enforcement, fire, medical emergency services, anything along those lines, we could enter a code into the handset. If you were a technician, you knew how to do it. And what that would do is it would prioritize that person's cell phone above anything else. So in other words, if an ambulance driver had one cell phone and I had my cell phone, if there was a lack of availability for cellular channels, they would automatically get priority over me. So their phone would work and I would have to wait until another channel opened up, which makes a lot of sense because if you're in an emergency situation, they call it that for a reason, right? Like, you should be able to communicate when it's an emergency, and that should take priority over just about everything else. Obviously, the technologies have changed a lot since then, but I have just gone with the assumption here that we still have something in place where if you're involved in any sort of emergency services, law enforcement, military, whatever it is, the things that people depend on for safety and, putting out fires would be one of them. I would assume that you've got priority and, if not unlimited access, at least an ability to release that cap when there's an emergency going on. When you're fighting fires, they go, okay, you know what? Why don't we go ahead and let you have more access, more data, instead of throttling or saying, oh, sorry, you ran out of you should have had rollover minutes, guys, because you knew there was going to be a fire this summer, so you shouldn't have used your data so much back in January and February. I'm really surprised at this. It will be interesting to hear more about how Verizon is going to respond to this and a few more details as far as their response goes. All I have here is Verizon disputes the claim, but what we do know is that we had a bunch of firefighters who are trying to prioritize where their resources are coming from and going to, and they ran out of data, which is really sad and scary at the same time. Let's see. Sounds like a lawsuit waiting to happen. Yeah, kind of like when... Did somebody just say that? Did the utility pole get affected by the wildfires? I don't know, but it's interesting when you said that, Harvey. Sorry, let me back up here. I'm getting behind on my comments. The BBC is the equivalent of PBS here in the States. Okay, that's good to know because, so far it does seem as if they're a lot more reliable. Sounds like a lawsuit waiting to happen. I would agree, Harvey. And then at the same time, I wonder, because if you remember when we had the fires last year in Sonoma, I want to say that they kind of came to the conclusion that the reason the fire started was because the utility companies had not trimmed back the trees that were growing around the electrical poles, and that's how the fire initially started. But I don't remember hearing about any lawsuits proceeding, based on that. So I could be wrong. There could be something out there, but it will be interesting to see, again, how Verizon reacts and if there is some sort of liability for them, because... Okay, fair enough. If you've got, even if you're a government agency or an emergency service and your contract says you have X amount of data, you can be held to that, right? I mean, they can stop you, but it just doesn't seem like the right thing to do. And I guess that's a sad thing about this day and age, is that we can't really depend on people doing the right thing. We have to depend on what laws are in place to force them to do the right thing and to be responsible to their customers. But it just seems like, if nothing else, it would have been a great PR move at the very least for Verizon to say, hey, guess what? No more data caps. There's a fire going on. Do what you have to do. Sponsored by Verizon. That would have been great, right? Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with a little shameless self-promotion, disguised as helping out somehow, but instead saying, no, sorry, you're out of data. We need to renegotiate your contract. Bad move, I think. I think this was a bad decision by whoever was in charge at Verizon. Bring back the carrier pigeons, Morse code over broadband. Okay, if so, maybe the rerouting got the network strained. Maybe, I don't know. So they need money. Yeah, they definitely need money because, big ISPs and cellular carriers don't make enough. But who is to say what is enough? Just plain short sight by the people in charge of marketing. Agreed, Johnny. I think it was a huge mistake for them to do this. They really should have thought this through. VZW, a legal mafia extorting people in a crisis. It would be horrible if something would happen to those houses. Yeah, well, things were happening. That's the problem. And firefighters were injured during this. And it's hard to say whether it was a direct result of their data being throttled, but certainly you want to help out in any way you possibly can when there's an emergency like this going on. Just crazy stuff. What happened to the WiMAX network? They served marvelously during Hurricane Katrina crisis more than a decade before. I don't know. It's a good question. I'm not sure about that, Johnny, but we should definitely have, not just the cooperation of carriers when there are emergencies like this, but we should have some sort of plan B, a backup plan in case, because when you're stranded somewhere and there's a fire going on around you and people are going in risking personal injury, risking injury to themselves and the people that they work with to come in and help out, man, you just think that everyone would cooperate. Like I said, it would have been a great opportunity for them to get some positive PR, but no, not this time. Anyhow, let's move on here. There is a cool new phone. I was going to say in town, but now it won't be in town. It's going to be launching in India, actually. I really wish that any of these companies would send these phones for me to do a review live here on the stream. That would be really cool. That's a hint, Xiaomi. Positioning the Poco phone, not sure what that means. We need to get our budget phone guy back on here to talk about this one. Positioning the Poco phone F1 as a hacker-friendly device. Now, what does that mean exactly? Xiaomi's Poco phone F1 will be the cheapest phone with a Qualcomm Snapdragon 845 processor when it goes on sale next week in India for $300, and I believe that is $300 US, so whatever that translates to in India or wherever else it may be that you are located, that's pretty decent for a smartphone that's got the top of the line processor at the moment. Xiaomi is also going out of its way to highlight the hacker/developer friendly features of this phone, and I have to wonder, when they say hacker, I guess the thing is this. Technically, it probably is going to be hacker friendly, although we've got this whole perception of hacker as being a bad thing, like people who are trying to sneak into networks where they don't belong, where hacking can mean a lot of different things besides that. So I suppose it's good marketing to call it hacker and or developer friendly. Unlocking the bootloader will not void the warranty. At least not yet. So unless they change something, and keep in mind all this stuff is subject to change nowadays, the company plans to upload the kernel source to GitHub on August 29th, the same day that the phone will be available for sale. Again, in India, probably in parts of Europe and Asia, almost definitely not in the US. In other words, if you don't like the software that ships with this phone, you'll probably have plenty of options to try something else, which is cool. And my number one gripe about iOS in particular, I like that if you take a phone out of the box and you already know the operating system, everything looks the same on every other device that you make. That part I get. But a little customization would be nice. If you could go in and say, okay, here's how it comes from day one, but I want to make it look like my phone. I want it to look the way that I want. I want to get rid of the garbage. The things that I never use don't need to be here. That seems like it's something that most people would be okay with, I think. Now, besides the fact that you have that ease of use thing going on when you have a consistency from your operating system from one to the next, you can always go with that vanilla flavor out of the box, but being able to customize it, I think, is cool. Unfortunately, and the article says, global does not include the United States. Shocker. But it does include around 50 markets, including parts of Europe and Asia. So for any of you outside of the US, I'd be interested to hear if you end up picking one of these up, or at least go into the store and check it out. It does look like a cool phone. For $300, you get a lot. Snapdragon 845 processor, a 6.2-inch 2246 by 1080 pixel display with a notch, of course, doesn't everything nowadays, right? Up to 8 gigs of RAM, up to 256 gigs of storage, dual rear cameras, 20 megapixel front-facing camera, stereo speakers, 802.11 AC Wi-Fi, I'm not sure why they threw that one in there, Bluetooth 5.0, a 4,000 milliamp hour battery, Qualcomm Quick Charge 3.0 support, a micro SD card slot. I'm not sure how much that's going to allow you to add, but I would assume it's quite a bit, probably at least 256 if not more. A headset jack. Wow, this phone is going to have everything. And listen to this, a fingerprint reader and a face unlock feature that works in the dark thanks to an infrared illuminator. So this is like the fully loaded everything phone, including, I can't even believe it has a headset jack. Does it have wireless charging? If it does, I would probably order this thing overseas. That's the only feature that I really want in my smartphone that I don't see listed here. But other than that, for $300, you could definitely buy an adapter and just plug it in and get your wireless charging if that was important to you. So any comments down here we need to see? No, nothing in the articles comment section. What do you guys think? Anyone have or have seen, oh hey Nate, what's going on? Have seen the Xiaomi Poco phone F1. I'm curious as to what the name is all about and whether this thing's really going to live up to all these claims, because it sounds like an incredible value for the money. And can we get replacement parts for it? Probably not. Did Xiaomi, is Xiaomi getting Spaniard, what? Johnny, is Xiaomi getting Spaniardized? Poco is few in Spanish. Okay, I got you. A phone with very few features or the bare minimum. That makes sense. Maybe it means something else in a different language? I don't know. It's a good question. Nate, I wanted to ask you at the beginning of the stream how smoky things are in your part of the state right now, because I think you're not far from Northern Oregon, right? I would imagine you're probably dealing with that. The Nexus 4 is already a hacker-friendly device. With the proper firmware and ROM, you can hack into Wi-Fi. Fun. I got rid of the bloatware on my Galaxy J7, but this is not making it any faster or saving the battery consumption. But you don't have to look at all the bloatware, right? I mean, doesn't it boot up faster at the least, like anybody ever boots their phone up, right? That used to be a big thing. Wow, I don't want to see the splash screen anymore. But let's be honest, who actually ever powers their phone off unless they're having problems with it? And Harvey says you got to overclock your phone. And I think he's right, Johnny. You got to overclock that processor, make it work. And you know what's crazy, guys? If you haven't already done so, if you work in phone repair, boot up a Galaxy phone or an iPhone for that matter with the screen removed and your finger on the area where the processor is located. These things get hot just booting up. I worked on a couple Samsungs a long time ago, and I just happened to have my hand in that area, and I seriously thought I broke the phone. And then I took out some other phones and started comparing them. When those things boot up, they get pretty hot to the touch. Let's see. Yeah, so Xiaomi, congratulations. This will be cool to see. Again, if we get one in the US, that would be cool. I think for the price, it might be worth investing in one of these just to see what it can do, right? So if you're an Apple fan, or you're not, and you want to you're baffled by this degree of loyalty that some of their customers have. It's just amazing. So if you haven't already heard, these Apple snatch and grabs have been going on for the last few months. We've had them on the East Coast. We had one in Fresno recently. There was another in Costa Mesa, and now Thousand Oaks, Los Angeles, where you walk in and you've got all of these expensive devices sitting out in an open area that's kind of inviting the public to come in and try them out. iPhones, iPads, MacBooks, you name it, all there. And under the assumption that most of the time employees are instructed, for questionably good reason, not to interfere with shoplifters. That is generally left to security to take care of, and even then it's a little questionable as to how far they're going to go to stop people from stealing things. Now, if you're talking about a candy bar or a t-shirt, that's one thing, but when you're talking about Apple devices, the dollar amounts add up pretty fast. Recently, Apple Store shoppers, not employees, Apple Store shoppers tackle suspects in $18,000 MacBook grab and dash heist. The crazy thing is here that there were only 3 suspects involved with this, and they were able to grab $18,000 worth of Apple's equipment. Of course, that's retail price, but still, that's a lot of dollars. That's a lot of devices. So the Apple Store in Oaks Mall is where we're talking about 3 individuals wearing hooded sweatshirts. This seems to be a consistent theme with these smash and grabs. Reportedly walked into the Apple Store and grabbed $18,000 worth of iPhones and MacBooks, but customers tackled 2 of the suspects before they were able to get off with the devices, holding them until local police arrived. So to me, this is kind of funny for a number of reasons, and I'm not gonna really, ultimately, I think this is a bad decision. You know, if you are in, what's a good way to put this? If you're in a store somewhere and someone's being assaulted, that's one thing. If you're in a store and you see someone who could potentially be harmed, that's something that I hope that at least some of us would react to. When you're talking about someone stealing merchandise, it gets a lot more complicated, because the main concern probably as a bystander should be that if you act to get involved and to prevent people from doing something like shoplifting, well, this is probably not shoplifting. This will probably be classified as grand theft, I would imagine, because of the dollar amounts involved. But you're still opening yourself up to litigation in the event that one of these people is harmed during the process of you detaining them, right? So you don't really have a right to do this. I'm not saying that I understand where it's coming from. You know, people are standing up and saying, hey, I see a crime taking place, I want to stop it. But I'm not sure it's advisable to always get involved in this particular, a crime of this nature, because it's not the type where someone who is being injured, you know, violently or by some other means. So, well, one of the first comments here was kind of, and the top voted one, coincidentally, kind of hit it on the nose. I like Apple. and I don't like shoplifters, but not in a million years would I intervene. That's just stupid. No lives were at stake. Apple absolutely does not want bystanders to intervene. Save your heroism for when people are at risk. Let Apple's security solve this problem. And I think that that is the correct answer. Now, obviously, everyone can make their own decision on this. You know, if you want to jump in and get involved somewhere, do so at your own risk. The problem here is that, again, if you injure anyone, whether it's one of the criminals or someone else who happens to be in the way, you do open yourself up to litigation. So if you have any sort of assets, you're saying, I'm willing to risk these, you know, just in case, because if someone gets hurt, they're going after you personally. At the same time, it's really fascinating to see the level of customer loyalty. I can't imagine this happening in too many other stores. You know, if you're in a grocery store and someone grabbed, I don't know, what's the most expensive thing in a grocery store? Probably a bottle of liquor or cartons of cigarettes or something like that, right? That's probably, you know, the most valuable small thing you're going to find in a grocery store. But if they go running out the door, even, you know, the first thing that came to mind was this. I don't think I'm tackling anybody when I'm not an employee. Like, I'm not really protected by Apple's legal team in the act of defending, you know, trying to recover their merchandise. Like, they're not telling me, okay, Mike, you know, whatever you do, we'll back you up in court. And without that, that means you have to pay for your own representation should someone come after you because of your actions here. And, you know, the first thing that struck my mind was, well, depending on the situation, I could be quite busy. I may not have time to stick around and wait for a police to show up to write a police report or whatever, but I could, you know, just kind of accidentally stick my leg out and trip somebody. But really, that kind of is along the same lines, right? You're going to end up with someone possibly being injured. Also, think about the damage to the merchandise. So if someone is running away with a $2,000 MacBook and you tackle them, and you damage that computer during this process, what's to say that Apple isn't going to go after you for the damages incurred during the time that you were, you know, interacting with this person who is attempting to commit a theft? I'm not really sure if that's going to leave you in a very good position, but I think it's probably a bad idea. Those are just my thoughts. I'm certainly not any sort of legal counsel, nor do I know much about it. Probably not even using the right terminology, honestly, but I don't think it's something I want to get involved in. That's just me. Now, if I was an employee and I knew that the company had my back, I'd have no problem, you know, 10, 20 years ago when I was much faster at running and much better at tackling. Just saying. Start banning hooded sweatshirts on 80+ degree weather. Yeah, you know, this is the thing. Obviously, there's a question there as to how far we want to go when it comes to, you know, somewhat profiling people. We've kind of had this discussion a long time ago about people wearing hoodies. It shouldn't be against the law to wear a hoodie. At the same time, if you're wearing a big overcoat, you know, a winter jacket or a thick hoodie or anything like that in the middle of summer and you're walking into a store, at the very least you think that the employees and the management should be on higher alert, right? It kind of raises some flags there. Nate said, smoke has been really bad, getting better over the last few days. Last week was hard to be outside. The smoke's so thick you can't see the mountains a mile away. Man, that is terrible, dude. That's bad for your lungs, and you're in there breathing those flux fumes too. I hope you have a good filtration system. That's awful, man. And it seems like this just happens every other year. And they're saying that we're probably going to be seeing a lot more of these fires more often because of the way that the climate is changing. So it's like, get used to it and look forward to more fires, which is really awful. Sorry, Greg says, but there's no way in heck I would tackle anyone stealing Apple's products in an Apple store. They can afford the shrinkage. And I have to agree with you there, Greg. I think I said recently that all these Apple thefts probably add up to being like a drop in the bucket for Apple. Thinking twice about that, it's probably more like a drop in a swimming pool is what these expenses add up to. At the same time, you got to wonder if it's maybe Apple is reconsidering the way that their stores are set up because it's so easy for this kind of thing to happen. And as the news gets out and people hear about these occurrences, they're going to say, hey, man, we could do the same thing. You get 5 people together or, you know, whatever. Go down to the clothing store, get some hoodies, and then walk into Apple, and next thing you know, they're running out with merchandise. I mean, you can only have so many people really keeping track of what's going on in the store. So I think that while it is a nice setup for presentation and to encourage people to get familiar with their products, there's obviously a high degree of liability, not only to their merchandise, but to other customers in the store. Because if this retail model is set up in a way that it attracts the type of people who are going to do these, snatch and grab things. And obviously, once in a while, someone's going to get knocked down. Somebody's kid is going to get run over. It's kind of a dangerous environment to be in altogether when you put it that way, or when I put it that way, I should say. So I wonder if Apple isn't kind of in the planning stages of figuring out a way to stop this from happening, because I think the liability of personal injury could end up costing them a lot more than the merchandise that's being involved in these thefts. One strange thing that Johnny noticed lately is that my phone got soft reset without affecting the total time since it turned on. Well, I don't think the soft reset should affect the clocks or the timers, should it? I think you'd have to do a hard reset if you wanted to set those all back to 0, I think. And then again, I think there are some phones that you can't do that. Even if you hard reset them, they'll still retain the original timer to show the lifespan of the phone. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's how that works. Let's see. Very foolish to defend someone else's property. It's not like there's a bounty to catch thieves. Yeah, that's the thing. I'm really baffled by... I mean, I understand that Apple customers have a high degree of loyalty, more so than probably any other brand at this point in time. But come on, you're going to start tackling people over this. It might be more of an opportunity for someone who enjoys, running after and tackling people to say, hey, now I have an excuse to do it. And I understand where that comes from. Also, still don't think it's a great idea for many reasons that I mentioned there. Let's see. Harvey, if you catch a shoplifter, Apple will give you an iPhone 5C. That's great. At this point, I think they give one to you just to get rid of them, I would hope. Interesting that if you commit a crime on someone committing a crime, it makes it your fault. Well, here's the whole thing, real world. And the reason we don't have vigilante justice is because even law enforcement, and especially the court system, don't want us to take the law into our own hands. So you will get away with a certain things if you're defending someone, if you're preventing someone from being harmed. It's a lot different when we talk about violent crimes. When we talk about thefts, I believe that for the most part, most companies and most law enforcement agencies probably prefer that normal people, don't really get too involved with this kind of stuff, because it generally ends up creating more criminal charges, if I'm correct. I think that's the way it is. You know what? I should get someone who's kind of more of an expert in this area to come on here, which, by the way, Johnny, yes, you got my email. I will be inviting that guest on. I'm not going to mention any names until we know for sure if they're coming, but another announcement I wanted to make today, I am going to get back into doing the Thursday night Tech Talk interviews. I've been wanting to do that for a long time. Just been a whole lot of reasons why that hasn't been able to come together. So that is something I'm looking forward to. Hopefully within the next week or two, we'll have that happening. So I don't have to just sit here and talk by myself, because, man, it wears out your voice after a while. There is a saying among Spanish people that a thief that steals from another thief get paroled for 100 years. What? Okay. A thief that steals from another thief gets paroled for 100 years. What does that mean? Because parole means generally you don't have to serve a sentence and you're going to be released instead. I'm not sure what that means. Tech law professional would be pretty cool. I agree completely. We need to get some. That's going to be another area that I need to explore and see about getting someone here who can answer these questions, because obviously everything that I say here, folks, this is all based on my opinion and my interpretation of what's going on. I am probably missing a few things, and I don't want this to go out as the authority on anything. I'm just reading these articles and giving you my input, but I'd love to have someone who we can ask those hard questions and have them give us a definitive answer as to, exactly what rights we have, what is a crime, when we should get involved, and how all of this stuff affects the technology around us and the things that we use. So that is a great suggestion. I am definitely going to look into that. So meanwhile, while we're talking about rights and so forth, you can interview me, Mike, if you want to get into some fun conspiracies. Well, that is another one, Nate. This is another thing that I'm trying to figure out how to make that fit my tech channel, because everyone at YouTube, and I've had a YouTube representative who kind of went over my account, my channel, and gave me some suggestions. And the moment that I told them, hey, I think I'm going to start another channel, a second channel that has nothing to do with my original one, they're just like, yeah, that's a bad idea. You should try to concentrate on one channel and put everything there. So how do we make conspiracy theories fit into a tech channel? I guess we need tech conspiracy theories. I don't know, but that would be fun, Nate. I am definitely interested in talking conspiracy theory stuff because it's fascinating. And That is the perfect segue for this next article. But let's keep in mind, every conspiracy that was proven to be true had to have started out as a theory. So in a way, I really resent the term conspiracy theorist, because as soon as you say that, people dismiss whatever idea it is that you are entertaining. So if you say, hey, I think they may, maybe fluoride in the water isn't good for people, and someone says, oh, that's a conspiracy theory, you're a conspiracy theorist, therefore that, and anything else that you say doesn't have the kind of credibility that it would if you had not brought up this idea that sounds out of the ordinary. And at the same time, a lot of these things that were thought of in that category ended up being true. So we have to, I think that it would be good to have a better term than conspiracy theory, because a lot of this stuff is just theory and is yet to be proven. And at the same time, I would like to distance myself from crazy people because when it comes to conspiracy theories, the unfortunate thing is that they do attract a certain amount of people who really have just about lost touch with reality. And I don't want to be lumped into that category, if that makes sense. So you remember that movie where Mel Gibson had all the conspiracy theories? I cannot remember the name of it, but the strange thing was he had all these crazy ideas about things that were not true, but then he ended up stumbling across something that actually was true. And of course, no one wanted to believe him because he thought all this other crazy stuff was going on. So that's the tricky part about this, is separating the two. And also, it's a very dismissive term. If you don't agree with something someone is saying, you just say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. And once you slap a label like that on something, again, it loses its credibility, and people look at it, from a very skeptical perspective, which we probably should look at everything that way nowadays. It was the CIA that created conspiracy theorist immediately after the JFK assassination to ridicule people who don't believe the official story. That does not surprise me at all. And it's been used quite a bit since then. My conspiracy theory is that phone companies make phones that are lightly water resistant as a tester before they come out with a certified water resistant phone. Example, iPhone 6s, Google Pixel 1, and OnePlus 6. A conspiracy is nothing more than the paranoia of some skeptics, people that purpose to be above of any other layman in regard to common sense logic. Well, with all that said, here's an interesting one. This is no longer a conspiracy theory. This is something that has been admitted by Google, so we can take it out of the conspiracy theory category, and it's a real deal. Idle Android phones send data to Google 10 times more often than iOS devices to Apple. We just found out about a week or two ago that Google devices send information to Google even when you turn off your location and all the other privacy settings that would prevent that from happening. It's still happening. Google acknowledged that. This is a thing. An idle Android smartphone sends user data back to Google servers nearly 10 times more frequently as an Apple device sends data back to Apple servers. Okay, great, but here's my question. One, why is Google doing it at all? It's terrible that it's 10 times as much, but why is Apple doing it at all? Why are either of these companies? It makes it look like, hey, these guys are way worse than these guys. It doesn't mean either of them are doing the right thing. They're both doing something bad. Just one of them's doing it 10 times more often than the other. So I love the angle on this article. You can kind of get an idea of where the person who wrote this is coming from, where their alliances may lie. Anyways, 46% of all Google's communications are with advertising services. Big surprise there, right? So to an extent, it is all about the money. Where's the other 54% going is what I would like to know. Research confirms recent Google location tracking scandal. The surprise comes when researchers recorded Google communications on an idle smartphone left with no user interaction. The research team says that 35% of all data requests sent back to Google servers from an idle Android device was location information. So they want to know where you are at all the time, even when you're not using your phone, even when you're not moving, even when the phone is idle. Keep reporting in and let us know where he's at, she is at, they are at. This discovery is not that surprising. Oh, did I leave one out? So the person is at, I guess is what I should say. Excuse me for all the politically correct out there. It's not just he and she anymore. This discovery is not that surprising when put into context with a recent investigation which revealed that Google continues to track users regardless if they disable location history in their Google account backend. So we already know this is going on. Let's see. Furthermore, users can't escape Google's tracking by using iOS devices with no Google apps installed on the device. This is because they will eventually run across one of Google's advertising services at one point or another. So did you hear that, iPhone users? It doesn't matter that you're not using a Google device. Eventually your phone will connect with one of Google's services, and you will also be tracked at the same level, I would imagine, as an Android phone would be. So as far as de-anonymizing, forget about it. What does it say here? De-anonymizing users is possible. Moreover, even if most of the data Google collects about users is anonymized, researchers said that there are various details that Google accumulates from the same device that can de-anonymize users. So in other words, even if you have your phone set up to not tell anyone who it is you are, trust me, they're going to figure it out. And we found this out through Facebook. And another interesting one, if you remember a while back, I did talk about the whole theory that Facebook Messenger was recording your voice and using that for advertising purposes, okay? And I've seen lots of, excuse me for just a second, friends. Okay, sorry, thought my allergies were coming back. I didn't want to sneeze into the microphone. So we found out a while back that Facebook, people thought that Facebook Messenger was using the microphone on your device to record your conversations and then targeting ads accordingly. And I've heard explanations as to why that is purely coincidence and there's no way that's happening. It's just an extension of your interactions with other people and what they're doing. And that's how they figure out your interests, and it has nothing to do with your telephone conversations. So yesterday evening, I'm sitting here and my girlfriend had made a telephone call to someone, and they started talking, and a location came up. And the location, I want to say, let me look it up really quick, because I recorded this because I thought it was so interesting. The location they were talking about was somewhere that we, she, and they don't discuss. Okay, so they were talking about a location, Lodi in California, which is not really a conversation topic at all. There's no reason that we would have Googled that. I mean, there's nothing to it. There's no connection between her, me, or Lodi on any level. And about 30 minutes later, she calls me into the room to tell me that she's got an advertisement in her Facebook feed for hotels in Lodi. And there's nothing. I mean, this conversation just came up 30 minutes earlier. There was no posting on Facebook, I'm going to Lodi, searching on Google, I'm looking at Lodi. There was nothing that had anything remotely to do with Lodi. Someone called and an incident had occurred in Lodi and they were talking about it on the phone. 30 minutes later, she gets an advertisement in her Facebook feed saying, here's where you can stay when you travel to Lodi. So you tell me, coincidence? Seems like quite a stretch to be purely coincidental, just my thinking. But surely I'll be labeled as a conspiracy theorist for that one. My name's not Shirley, though. Let's see. Maybe Google wants to use your spare data speed for their own services. Oh, what did I miss here? The battle of who can gather more customer data. Verizon's throttling of firefighters could go unpunished because the FCC repealed the open internet order from EFF.org. Shocker, right? Yeah. Google is doing that to develop an accurate map of... okay. Only thing I can think of is if Google wants to know if you're at home or work, maybe using this to guess where you will go will help Google Maps. That's the only thing I can think of. Yeah, I can't think of too many things either, other than the more information you have about a person and their habits, the easier it is to sell advertising, to say, hey, we know exactly what your target is. We know where this person spends their time, what they buy, who they know, etc. And the more information that you gather, the more valuable that becomes. And now it is for sale, and it is completely legal for them to sell that information to whoever wants to buy it. And even if they say that, well, they're never going to know who it is. They just know, your location or your device. We don't tell them your name. I assure you that remaining anonymous on Google or any other modern platform is virtually impossible unless you're you're using so many different layers of protection that really you are probably falling into the paranoid category, will be my guess. Can we disable hardware-wise the GPS function on a modern smartphone? Yes, you can, Johnny. In fact, if you happen to, you really can. If you know where the GPS module or antenna is located, you can disable that. Keep in mind, however, if you're connected to Wi-Fi or a cellular network, they can still determine fairly precisely what your location is. So you'd really have to be disconnected completely, which means how are you going to get any data in the first place? So that would be a difficult one. You'd probably have to use, like I said, several different layers of anonymity software, like a VPN, proxy, and all sorts of other stuff that I really don't know enough about to advise you. But you can certainly disable the GPS. That's an easy one. Find the GPS module. If you have an iPhone, some of the iPhones, you can just pull the GPS antenna out of the phone completely. Not that difficult. However, that will disable your Wi-Fi and or Bluetooth in most cases. So again, it's kind of a tricky one there. You can just pull the GPS module out if you locate it, or scratch it deeply enough that it doesn't function anymore. Do a test on your next show, Mike. You can screen share some random sites to see the ads. The talk about a subject you've never talked about before for a few minutes and look at the sites again. Yeah, we can do that for sure. I don't know if it would happen that quickly. It would be creepy if it did, but yeah, why not? With this said, every time I sign in on a new phone, Google emails me saying I signed in someone in Washington. I'm in California. Yeah, I get those too. It's really creepy and not a theory. Happened to me too. Yeah, it's weird. And, like I said, I give people the benefit of the doubt, and I've heard people talk about how this is really happening, why it's a coincidence, but no, I've seen too many things that don't make sense, like things that you would never discuss, that you would never Google, you never have anything to do with, and now it shows up in your news feed or, as an ad somewhere else. It's really weird. What am I afraid of? Nothing. I just don't like it. I feel like that's my information, and if you want to know exactly where I spend my time, my money, and who I interact with and everything else, you should be sending me a check, right? Shouldn't we be paid for this data that's being extracted by all these advertising companies so they can figure out what to sell us? At the very least, we should be compensated for allowing them to have access to that information, I think. That's my crazy conspiracy theory idea. Okay, so this last one, I want to preface this by saying that normally when I see anything on Fox or CNN, I am extremely skeptical about everything that they say nowadays because they both have such a strong agenda on either side of the political spectrum that it seems like every news story traces back to, hey, we endorse this side or we endorse this side, and that's why we're showing you this. And you'll even see the same article from two different perspectives. So keep that in mind. I generally stay away from CNN and Fox for those reasons, but I couldn't resist this one because it's just exactly one of the theories that I've had for a long time, and that is, could hackers steal your DNA and sell it? Or worse, there are a lot of worse things I could think of that they could do with it. So this is from foxnews.com. Like I said, I'm telling you that, so you take that into consideration when I read it. But at the same time, there's some things here that I think are interesting. Hackers know your DNA is invaluable. They can collect a sample when you throw out a used Kleenex or sip from a disposable cup. Okay, this sounds like some CSI stuff, right? It's probably not going to happen. But criminals can collect the DNA sample to blackmail you later, or sell it on the dark web, or save it in an archive for future use. Yeah, potentially they could. It's unlikely they would do that. But things have changed nowadays. We have entire companies that are set up specifically for the purpose of collecting and studying DNA, and I'm sure that they have all of your information stored there, who you're related to, what your genome looks like, and everything else. So, or your DNA fingerprint. I shouldn't say genome is probably the wrong term for that. So what happens? When you engage in DNA testing with 23andMe, you make a choice about which testing and cost model you prefer. That's about it. But you make an assumption, wrongly, that this is their business model. Charge me for a kit and provide the service. But as we've discovered, that is not the case. Their actual business model is based upon selling their ever-growing data pool of DNA results to whoever wants to purchase it. Last month, 23andMe announced a major partnership with pharmaceutical giant GlaxoSmithKline focused on research and development of innovative new medicines and potential cures. Sounds like a good thing, right? But at the same time, the fact that your DNA information is being sold is, I don't know, a little unnerving, right? And the crazy thing about it is that it doesn't even have to be you. If one of your family members' DNA has already been submitted, for all practical purposes, it's getting pretty close to yours when it comes to matching up with who you're related to and your family tree and history and your genetics and your propensity to develop certain health conditions and so forth, right? Those are all tied in very closely to your blood relatives. Reuters recently reported, for example, that immigration authorities in Canada have been using DNA and ancestry websites to ascertain the nationality of migrants. Okay, first of all, I think that's wrong. I think that statement is not accurate because you can't really determine what nation someone is from by their DNA. You can determine their ethnicity and their ancestors' genetic origins, but you can't take someone's DNA and go, oh, you came from this country, because nowadays we can live in different countries without altering our DNA in any way, shape, or form. So that really doesn't sound accurate to me. You can determine their genetic history. You can figure out who they descended from, you know, what their ethnicity was, but you can't figure out what country they're from based on that. That's kind of crazy. So that, I think that part of the article, I think is not entirely accurate. An FTC spokesperson released a statement to Fox News. What was his name? It doesn't say what his name is. Okay. Rather than just clicking I accept, consumers should take some time to understand how their information will be used and stored. Consumers should weigh both the benefits and the risks, such as the risk of a security breach. And when setting up an account on a DNA testing site, privacy-conscious consumers should choose settings to maximize privacy. At the end of the article, it says, what will ease the minds of everyday customers? One avenue is to make better laws about protecting your DNA beyond the 2008 federal law called GINA, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, and for states to become more involved. How about this? How about you submit your DNA sample, and instead of providing your name and address, you just give them a number, and they tell you that, okay, the number is posted here, and if this is your number, here are your results, and you don't associate anything with it. In my mind, that seems like it would be the best way to protect your privacy. Or maybe you and your neighbor decide to get DNA testing and you just swap samples and then you swap results so everybody knows who everybody is, but the company that took the information doesn't. I don't know. I'm just kind of brainstorming here. I don't know. I suspect that there's reasons why you don't want your genetic sample, your name, your location, everything about you, plus all this information that's being gathered about your whereabouts and who you communicate with and what country or what ethnicity your ancestors are, for all this stuff to be stored in a database that potentially could be hacked, where someone could get that information and use it for purposes that are not with the best intentions. So that's the thing that would concern me about this as we kind of see this technology evolve. It's kind of weird. I mean, it just seems like there's something strange about it, and this article kind of hit it on the head for me, and that is this: no matter what information is saved or collected from a person, willingly, knowingly or not, if it falls into the wrong hands, there's always that possibility. Just like your social security number, just like your bank account information, these things get hacked. People's passwords get found out. There's phishing attacks. There's all sorts of ways for the wrong people to get a hold of this. And what happens when they do? What can they do with your DNA? I mean, I would think that it's even more convincing than a fingerprint somewhere down the line, where we maybe go into a different type of biometric security feature where, okay, something actually tests your DNA to verify your identity, and now someone is broken in to these data centers that have your DNA stored, and they can somehow replicate it or use that in order to get past these security measures that we'll have at some point. That is my real concern here. It will be interesting to see how this goes down, or how it evolves. Let's see. Let me back up here a second here. Just smash your phone with the hammer and use pen and paper. Hackers should steal my DNA and clone me so I can have another person to edit my videos, multiplicity style. My wife and I were talking about flying. We had not searched or price checked anything. I was explaining to her that I do not want to go through TSA. After we finished talking, I picked up my phone and... you're killing me. That's it. Oh, the first thing I see is an ad for a plane ticket. Yeah, kind of weird. Funny how that works, right? And if you had not communicated your intention to travel anywhere else and suddenly you're seeing an advertisement right there, like shortly after, to me, that's a little more than coincidence. I mean, I don't generally see travel advertisements. I don't see them. And then suddenly there's a phone call about traveling and this advertisement pops up. It's a little weird. Of course, Facebook has denied that they use this for marketing, but it does say in their terms and conditions when you install Facebook Messenger, you do allow access to your microphone, and I want to say your photo gallery and a number of other things in your phone. So it's not like you didn't sign off on it when you installed the software, which is unfortunate because none of us reads through the small print. You know, nobody does unless you're a lawyer, and you'd almost have to be one to understand what a lot of that stuff says. That's it. Harvey's going to be a hermit and forego any human contact. I know, it's a little extreme, but I'm just saying these are things that we should be aware of at the very least, right? They are total propaganda machinery. 23andMe sent an email to developers saying it will disable its API in 2 weeks. Apps will only be able to use the company's generated reports, not the raw data. Interesting. That is interesting to hear, Greg. Hey, Nate, you got to take off? All right, man. Take it easy. We will see you next time. I'm about to log off here myself in a minute. Johnny Chang just happened to reconnect with a cousin with the 23andMe relative function. Cool. I mean, there's good stuff there. I'm not saying that there's not. I'm not knocking it completely. There are some very cool uses. You know, you might find some relatives, some long lost relatives that you didn't know about. You might find out, you know, the other argument is this. You might find out that you have a high risk of a certain type of disease occurring. But if that's the case, do you want to know about it? I would think if it's preventable, yes. If it's not, I'm not sure I want to live with that hanging over my head. Like there's a good chance you're going to get this type of cancer, or this kind of heart condition or whatever, if there's nothing I can do to stop it. Those are my thoughts. Let's see. The only important information I got from 23andMe is that I'm a good candidate for black market organ harvesting. What? Wow. I suspect the famous must think twice before spitting their saliva elsewhere. I would think that anyone who is a high-profile personality, I agree, Johnny, whether it's a celebrity, politician, someone who's wealthy, you know, that's something you definitely want to think twice about. And I'm not any of the above, and I think twice about it. I'm not sure it's something I want to do. John Cassidy, hey, what's going on? I don't think it would do anything because all they want to do is make money, and there's no way for them to make money with DNA that I know of. Well, maybe not yet. I'm just saying. Eventually, I mean, companies are making money by collecting your data. So if they can make money by paying attention to where you are, who you talk to, what websites you go to, what YouTube channels you watch, if they can make money off of that, I don't think it's a stretch to think that eventually having access to your DNA would be profitable somehow. I don't know how. I'm just saying. Man, I am in trouble with my wife. I'm always seeing dating websites ads. I gotta say, I have seen some bizarre suggestions in my YouTube feed, and I don't understand it. I watch tech videos, and that's about it. Maybe some comedy here and there, like some fail videos and cat videos and stuff like that. But I get the weirdest things in YouTube. I don't know what they're doing. I know they changed their algorithm for suggested videos, but I'm getting weird stuff. I'm gonna switch computers or something pretty soon. Anyways, friends, that is just about it for this evening. I'm going to log off here momentarily. I'll be back again Monday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I want to say thank you all for joining me this evening. Next Thursday again at 6 p.m. and within the next couple of weeks, we will have some guests on here, so it won't just be me talking, but we'll certainly still be talking about technology stuff, maybe some conspiracy theories too, which I think are fascinating. Harvey said 23andMe says there's nothing wrong with my DNA and I'm a descendant of Genghis Khan. Wow, you and what, like 5% of the world's population, or is it 2%? Isn't that crazy? I just was reading a little bit about that, and I've seen a couple documentaries and listened to podcasts, and the whole Genghis Khan thing is fascinating. I mean, crazy. They say that really weird stuff, you know, some of it pretty disgusting, but the Khans killed so many people that they literally changed the carbon footprint of the planet. So they can go dig back in history and they can see the change of the carbon footprint based on the number of people who are wiped out by the cons, which is crazy. But yeah, there's some huge amount of the population of the planet, and I want to say it's something like 2%, 3% of the population has Genghis Khan's DNA, including Harvey, apparently. So crazy stuff. All right, folks, I'm going to get off. Again, thanks for joining. I will be back, and I totally forgot to put the chat up here on the screen this time, so I am not going to edit this video. So hopefully whoever watches the beginning of it won't get too bored and they can skip ahead. I'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your week.